Our project was on ideal women throughout society and culture. We will view how society saw an ideal standard of women, of a divine mother, a Renaissance woman, and a barmaid slash sex worker through the four pieces of art that was created by men. To begin, this mother pendant was made in the 16th century and commissioned by her son, King Isigny. This was important because artwork of women in the Indo culture was rare, so this set a standard of women, especially royal women. She was viewed as natural, powerful, and divine. We will study these interpretations through the symbolism seen on the next slide. First to note is that the pendant was made of ivory, which is white. White correlates to purity and connection to the god of the sea. Ivory was also a material of high value of trading, so the queen was wealthy, pure, and divine. Next, in the Indo culture, a person of high intelligence was correlated to having a high forehead. People of high intellect and nobility were known to have this high forehead, and were probably due to genetically breeding with only others who shared this same genetic trait. Moving down the face, we see that the eyes are made of with iron inlets. Iron correlates to strength. They did this because they saw the queen Eoba as strong, for she had armies and helped her son come into reign. Around the face, we see carvings of mudfish and Portuguese traders. The mudfish is native to the Indo-culture area, and the creatures can dwell on the land and the sea. So the artist was demonstrating that the Queen Mother ruled on land and sea. She's also known to have power on land and sea because she was able to trade with the Portuguese traders and bring wealth to her people. Last part to note of the pendant is the perfect symmetry of her face. In the Endo culture, they found that symmetry was a way to portray wisdom. Her face also has a calm expression to show that she had composure and dignity. As an Endo woman, she would see the king wear this pendant to ceremonies and would recognize all the symbols and know that that was a standard to work for.
Hi, my name is Noelle Kershaw, and today I'll be presenting on the Virgin of Guadalupe. I'll explore how this iconic image goes beyond religion to reflect gender roles, indigenous identity, and cultural resistance during colonial Mexico. Throughout history, art has reflected cultural values, especially through the way women are depicted. These images communicate ideas about gender roles, spirituality, and identity. The Virgin of Guadalupe is a prime example. She's more than a religious figure, she's a symbol of femininity, power, and cultural fusion in colonial Mexico. The Virgin of Guadalupe appeared in 1531 to an indigenous man named Juan Diego on Tepeyac Hill. She spoke his native language, which made her accessible and sacred to the indigenous people. At the time, Spanish colonizers were forcing Catholic conversion. This appearance blended Catholicism with indigenous beliefs and helped shape a unique Mexican religious identity. Rise as a national symbol, her image spread through religious and political campaigns. By the 19th century, during Mexico's War of Independence, she had become a national symbol. She represents unity, faith, and cultural pride, a maternal protector for all Mexicans, regardless of class or race. Visually, the Virgin is full of symbolic meaning. She has her head bowed and hands in prayer, expressing humility and modesty, qualities colonial society valued in women at the time. Her blue mantle connects her to Mary, the Queen of Heaven, and the mandorla of stars highlights her divine presence. Most importantly, her darker skin tone breaks away from Eurocentric depictions of the Virgin and gives her an indigenous identity. Her indigenous features were intentional, chosen by religious leaders and artists so Native people could see themselves in her. This was especially powerful for indigenous women who were being marginalized and erased. She stood as proof that their identity had value, offering comfort and spiritual authority during a time of intense oppression. If we compare her to male religious figures from the same period, who were often depicted with power and authority, the contrast is striking. The Virgin of Guadalupe is humble and peaceful, yet she became a source of immense strength. Her gentle presence hides her political and cultural power, making her a subversive symbol of resistance. In colonial Mexico, women were expected to be chaste, obedient, and devoted, especially within the home and the church. The Virgin embodies these traits perfectly, established the ideal for womanhood. But unlike European ideals, she was indigenous, making her a distinctly Mexican model of femininity. Even though she represents modesty, the Virgin is not a symbol of weakness. She was carried on banners into battle and invoked in political revolutions. She unified people and led resistance, showing that a peaceful figure could still be a powerful one. In conclusion, the Virgin of Guadalupe reflects both the societal expectations of women and the cultural resilience of indigenous communities. She is sacred, maternal, and modest, but also powerful, political, and revolutionary. Her image continues to bridge worlds, colonizer and colonized, male and female, faith and resistance. She remains one of the most enduring symbols of Mexican identity and womanhood.
Before we go into all the symbolism in Venus of Urbino by Titian, we first must look into the context behind the painting, and especially the fact that we can assume this painting was created for private and intimate viewing. We know from Giorgio Vasari that the painting was likely intended for private and intimate viewing because, in Vasari's description of the painting, he noted that it was inside the Duke Geobaldo II de Rovere's guardaroba, meaning wardrobe suite. And of course, if it's in a wardrobe suite, back then this was definitely a private area, and if we're hanging paintings in there, this isn't something we're just casually inviting our guests to go in and look at. So this was definitely a private commission, as well as the green silky curtains representing luxury back here. Uh, this is linking the painting to themes of eroticism and privacy as well, because at this time frame that the painting was created in the High Renaissance, we know that green and silk were commonly associated with sexual acts and sexual propositions and paintings that included, for example, prostitutes and prostitution. So we're also creating that eroticism here. There's also this background information with these pops of colors here and here that point to Titian's Venetian heritage. In Venetian tradition, there was a lot of rich color, and they tended to use oil paint like Titian did here. At the time, humanism was also a major influence in the High Renaissance, and we can see that here with how Titian focuses on Venus, the female figure, and how the light falls on her and where he shades. Now, if we move on to the symbolism, like the dog at the feet of the woman, Venus, dogs at this time also commonly symbolized fidelity, and with the usage that Titian has in this painting, we can assume that he's using it to point out marital fidelity. Also, when we're looking at the Venus Pudica pose, this is a common representation of modesty and feminine sexuality. We've also got these maids in the background, and they're retrieving a wedding dress from a cassone. This is symbolic of Venus's marriage chest, perhaps gifts from her endowment and engagement. Additionally, the maids preparing it for her can be seen as a certain representation of motherhood or preparations for motherhood through marriage. Besides her pose being indicative of Venus, the Roman goddess of love and equivalent of Aphrodite, the woman is also holding roses, and not to mention the rose is also embedded in the pattern of this cushion and settee. Roses are a very common symbol of love because of their association with Venus, and then for Titian to represent them as a permanent markers on the bed points to the constancy and indefinite depiction of love and devotion. Another foliage to make note of this is the myrtle plant in the background up here, which also commonly symbolized immortal love and sensuality. In closing, all the points in this visual analysis and summary can be used to make the conclusion that the painting Venus of Urbino by Titian is a classical representation of the ideal woman, seen by men for women. It is the ideal for a woman to be graceful and pure, as well as devoted and unwavering to her husband, as portrayed and seen by men. This painting was created by a man, commissioned by a man, and seen by men in the wardrobe suite. The reminder is for women and their expected roles to stand by. This is the ideal women portrayed through Titian's Venus of Urbino.
Hello, my name is Ellie Phelps, and for my analysis of the ideal women through art and through the ages, I chose this painting. This is called A Bar at the Folies Bergère. It was painted by Edward Manet in 1882. It was his final large work, and this piece was pretty controversial at the time for a number of reasons, one of which being this incorrect perspective. Incorrect. And that's because we're looking at this barmaid dead on, and this mirror behind her is showing her back. It's reflecting her back in a different angle than is realistic. And this version is a little cut off, but there's a man over here that she's speaking to. And this incorrect perspective, it was so heavily criticized, but really what this shows is her outward appearance over here being engaged in conversation, where her inward appearance is so apathetic, and we can see that in her face, that what she's feeling inside is so different from what she's portraying. And that really goes to show what was expected of these women at the time. And the incorrect perspective is really showing that we have the incorrect perspective of these women. Now, we know that this is a barmaid because there's symbolism here in the oranges. Those symbolized sensuality, and there's champagne and over here, and perfume bottles that symbolize that that's what she is and who she is. And this background is so lively, but her expression is anything but lively. And Edward Manet, he painted a lot of controversial paintings, and this one was controversial because of perspective, but also because he painted a barmaid, which wasn't the ideal woman at the time. He went against that, and I think that's what's so incredible about this painting. Throughout most of art, the ideal woman was depicted as white and elegant and mythical. It was something for women to aspire to and for men to romanticize. But, over time and through different cultures, that has changed a lot, and artists have pushed the boundary of what the ideal woman is, and whether that's the queen mother, who was used as to help lead armies, that is so different from what the original ideal woman was, or the Virgin de Guadalupe. Even though she was humble and chaste, she was also indigenous, and she had dark skin, which was also very different from the original standard. And with the bar at the Folies Bergère, with a barmaid, that is something that never would have been depicted in the beginning of art. Even then, when Manet painted that, it was so different from the ideal woman. And Venus of Urbino, it's a good comparison to look back at, what we started with, and how over time that has changed what the ideal woman is. And as time continues to go on, it's going to keep changing what the ideal woman is and what that standard is for art.